New Mexico in some way, shape, or form? All right. I cover all New Mexico in some way, shape, or form. I'm the only Weather Service hydrologist here. So, yeah, in New Mexico. So I'm the hydrologist for both the Albuquerque office and the El Paso, and then state liaison for those two counties covered by El Paso. Excuse me, by Midland office. So I always start each one of these presentations off with this, since we're going to talk about the drought monitor. What is the U.S. drought monitor? In short, it's an attempt to cover different types of drought all in one map, short-term, long-term. And when we're talking about drought, most people think immediately meteorological. You should have 10 inches of rain. I only got 5, therefore I'm in some sort of drought. Agricultural, how drought impacts agriculture, hydrological, low rivers, dry riverbeds, socioeconomic. An example of that would be, for example, ski resorts during snow drought, those towns taking that sort of impact, and ecological. The focus really is more on these 4: meteorological, agriculture, hydrological, and ecological, than the socioeconomic. But we're trying to represent all this on this map, and I want to be clear that the drought monitor, which has been around since 1999, is not affiliated directly with the USDA. There's some drought monitor authors of the USDA, so it can be used for triggering drought programs or drought relief or various state level programs. However, that is not its intention. Those programs do not come into any sort of consideration when we're doing the input to the U.S. Drought Monitor or in the national author's realm as he's making these drawings. So what does this drought classification really mean when you see the drought monitor? So you have 5 categories you can see on the U.S. Drought Monitor. D0, this top one, is abnormally dry, all the way down to exceptional drought, which a good chunk of New Mexico is in that exceptional drought. Now, people see this chart and they immediately, their eyes go to this, possible impacts. And the emphasis here is possible. These are potential impacts at an area. Remember, this is a nationwide map, and actually a North American map that focuses on drought. So these are potential issues, but the real heart of the U.S. Drought Monitor is the objective data, being the weather data, soil moisture data, various hydrologic data. And here's some examples of the ranges of values that this objective data gives us. But the real binding tie for all these drought categories is this, what we call the percentiles, the objective drought indicator blend. So it's basically, we're putting if you want to think of it like flood, a 1 in 100 year event, we're tying a percentage to that. So abnormally dry, 21 to 30% of your time, you might see abnormally dry. Not that uncommon. All the way down to D4, which should only be 0 to 2% of your drought. So if you see D4 in the drought monitor, we're saying this truly is an exceptional drought. And it's based off of that objective blends. The drought monitor authors are very firm on that. The convergence of the data, which means convergence of the evidence approach, looking at the objective data, some impacts, but by and large, the objective data has to support it. So I think it's going to be very clear, because a lot of these impacts, there could be human issues here. For example, shortages of water in reservoir streams and wells, creating water emergencies. There could be various human-caused reasons for the shortages of water, reservoirs, and wells, depending on management techniques, over pumping, various things. So we look at all sorts of data, convergence of the evidence. If we lay everything out, where does it stand? But that's the driving force behind U.S. Drought Monitors, the objective drought blends, not the possible impacts. So what is the current U.S. Drought Monitor? Normally issued on Thursday morning. Last week with a holiday, it was issued on Wednesday. And there we are right now. Just over 50% of the state of New Mexico is in D4 drought, particularly the Arizona-New Mexico border, down along the Central Mountain Chain in southeastern New Mexico. 79% of the state is in either extreme or exceptional drought. So really, we're starting to see, after 2 failed monsoon seasons okay last winter, really starting to see drought build solidly through New Mexico. If you go out to the southwest, you see D4s all through the southwest. For anyone involved in wildland fire, it's been a very active season, starting to get some D3 over in California, but really through the southwest, Four Corners region, a good chunk of Arizona into the Great Basin, seeing that D4 drought. So it's certainly not just confined to New Mexico. It is a regional issue, and particularly for parts of New Mexico that depend on headwaters in Colorado, this is not a good thing either. So here's the last 180 days of precipitation. This is a National Weather Service product. It's combined rain gauge, radar, it's percent of normal. Now, normally we don't like using percent of normal for drought. It really doesn't tell the story that well. But I want you to look at the general patterns. So really, you can see over New Mexico persistently over the last 6 months, the southeast corner of New Mexico is holding well below normal. We have some areas in New Mexico that are showing actually a little bit above normal, but we need to take in consideration we really only have 1 or 2 good monsoon bursts in there and very short duration. So what we're seeing here, while those areas look to be above normal or above normal, what you're really seeing there is 1 or 2 days that gave some good precipitation, and that was it. This is probably a little bit better telling of the story. This is another product that uses data back through 1895, a gridded data set here that puts things in perspective. So this is the monsoon precipitation for July through September. Generally, monsoon season is considered July 15th through September 30th in the Southwest. But so look at those months all together. Red is record driest for those areas. You're certainly seeing along the Arizona-New Mexico border, southeastern New Mexico, parts of the Sangre de Cristos and the Jemez and lower extension of the San Juan River Valley, lowest on record. You see again moving through parts of northeastern New Mexico. And we discussed about this last month if anyone attended these seminars. These are a single event. It made things look better than they really are. So purely numerically, looking at purely meteorological drought, those areas look a little bit better. But when you account for things like evapotranspiration and then the duration of other precipitation, that in between precipitation events, that area is solidly D3, D4, with the exception of right in the extreme northeast New Mexico. So let's look at snowpack. Winter's already started. We've had some snow events, some early snow events. And this is from our colleagues at the National Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS, part of the USDA. They're the ones who actually run the snow monitoring networks. So on the left, we've got the Rio Grande Basin, on the right, the Pecos. And these are primarily automated stations. So these black line that you see, this little squiggly black line, that's the current snow season 2021. This nice smooth green line through here, if I can get my mouse through here with the little star above it, that's the 30-year normal. This will be updated here. Actually, it's updated on the decade, so we'll see an update next year here. And then the previous 3 years you can see here are on there. So 2018, certainly over most of New Mexico, record low snow. You can see certainly in the Pecos, you can't really even, it's 2018 here at the bottom on the left. So the Rio Grande, we had that nice big hit end of October. It's the Rio Grande Basin, particularly New Mexico, is running a little bit below normal right now, but it's a pretty flat line. It's not really accumulating snow, and we actually lost some of what we've seen there. The Pecos, again, is well below normal right now. But over the last few years, you can see where last season's failure of the monsoon season really played a big part in our low runoff. So looking right here on the left graph, this light blue is 2020. On the Pecos graph, that kind of red is 2020. So not really that bad snow water equivalent with. So as hydrologists, we really care about not the depth of the snow, how much water's in it when we melt it down. So in 2020, that 2019-2020 snow season, it really wasn't that bad on the Rio Grande snow-wise. Certainly we saw an earlier peak, not as high, below normal. Basin wide. The Pecos was near normal, actually started off pretty good, but you can see we saw early and rapid runoff. That tends to be what's going the trend now. But anyone, particularly in the Pecos River, who watched our stream flows, and in the Rio Grande, we saw very low stream flows. And a large part of that was our soil moisture. We lost some snow during melt-offs and sublimation. But a large part of that was very low soil moisture. We need that monsoon precipitation, even in the mountains, to keep that soil moisture up. That way you can make effective use of the runoff. So this is where we're going into the 2021 runoff season, that we're kind of already behind the curve. We've had 2 failed monsoon seasons, and I'll talk about soil moisture here in a minute, and we're already behind on soil moisture. So you can see even on the Pecos, with a pretty much a normal season last year up to around the peak, we still had very low runoffs. So here's soil moisture. This is a change product. This is from NASA Sport. It's a combination of satellite data, observed ground, and radar-based rainfall. But on the left is the 1 month's relative soil moisture difference. So we go down to about 2 meters in the soil, about 6 feet or so, a little bit over that. And you can see over the last month, there's some areas that have picked up a percent or two there of soil moisture, mainly these weak snow systems. The best you actually see is in the Sangre de Cristos, up Angel Fire, that area there where we had a pretty good snow event. But you see there's an increase in soil moisture there, but most of the states start to lose it. Now let's roll back 6 months when we're coming out of runoff season, and you can see by and large, most of the state is drier than it was 6 months ago. So what little, we had a poor monsoon season in 2019, winter in 2020, and you can see already, barring some recent precipitation events, a little bit of summer, we're losing soil moisture. We're not gaining soil moisture. So that's certainly something we don't want to see going into the next runoff season. It's going to be a significant impact if we really don't see a strong normal or above normal winter. We're going to potentially have some significant water supply issues as far as with respect to runoff. Just we need that soil moisture. So what's causing this coming up from this winter? What's kind of the crystal ball? So La Nina. So we all hear about La Nina, El Nino. What is it? So El Nino is typically warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific, south of Hawaii, from about 5 north, 5 south. La Nina is the opposite. It's colder than normal. So La Nina is solidly in place now. The atmosphere and the ocean are working together. And this is typically the impacts we see from La Nina, kind of a textbook La Nina, which is what 2017, 2018 was. The Pacific Northwest stays wetter because that jet stream is pushed further north. The Southwest, and by the Southwest, I mean everywhere from Southern California, really through West Central Texas, Southern Colorado, Southern Utah tend to stay drier. The warmer conditions tend to be a little further east, but we'll see how that plays out. Now, one thing with the La Nina pattern, you can see where this colder air is sitting up here over the northern U.S., northern Canada. We can still get some cold air outbreaks, some bitterly cold air outbreaks as this cold air makes a dive as this jet stream moves through. And that's certainly what we've been seeing and we'll see coming up here this week. But the bottom line, a textbook La Nina, warmer and drier. So sure enough, the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center, and I didn't update the title on the slide. I will here in a second when it goes out to y'all. December, January, February, we're looking at above normal temperatures, a strong chance of that, and below normal precipitation. So how these outlooks work is essentially we've got 3 chances of something happening. We can be above normal, normal, or below normal. Everything being equal, there's a 33% chance of that happening either way. You roll the dice, it's going to be one of the 3. What we're doing in these graphics is we're weighing that dice. So the Climate Prediction Center looking at La Nina is saying for southern New Mexico, holding a 33% chance of normal temperatures. However, they're heavily weighing that dice roll toward above normal for the December, January, February. So if we roll this dice 100 times, 6 out of 10 for southern New Mexico is going to come up above normal. Same thing on the precipitation. For southern New Mexico, 50% chance of, actually 60% chance of below normal, 50% over most of the state. And then kind of more critically for water supply, we're seeing here northern New Mexico, southern Colorado, holding in that 33 to 50, depending on where you want to call it, percent chance of below normal. So rolling that dice 100 times, anywhere between 33 and 50% of the time, we're going to be below normal. So going a little bit further out, this slide did not update either on the left, so I apologize. The more important one here is on the right. We are seeing the below normal precipitation chances actually expanding a little further north. The outlook is above normal as well on temperatures. So again, these will be corrected when I send the slides out here to Marshall in a little bit. The links didn't auto update like they should have. But we're seeing that below normal chance of precipitation really January, February, March. And remember, the bulk of our snow, particularly in the Pecos headwaters and the Sangre de Cristos, is January, February, March. So that trend is certainly not good. And then the above normal temperatures, what that will lead to is either you're getting, if you do get precipitation, it could be rain versus snow, or you may see a higher snow level. So where normally you would see snow down to say maybe 8,000 feet, you may be seeing snow levels at 9,000 feet. So looking out through the extended the seasonal drought outlook through February, drought is expected to continue. Really, again, with the La Nina conditions expected, we certainly will have some precipitation. We've got some winter weather advisories out right now for parts of the Sangre de Cristos, but we're not expecting really drought to improve significantly. We'll likely continue to see what we're seeing right now through most of the region through February. So that's my last slide. I am going to, once I'm done here, get off. So I'm available for any questions right now, Marshall.
Thank you very much, Royce. It's not a very pretty picture with the drought monitor and the drought outlook there, but we sure appreciate your presentation, so we at least know what we can expect. And I know you said you're fixing to have to get off here, so we'll go ahead and take any questions at this time for Royce. And I would like to remind everybody to go, if they would like to, go ahead and use that chat function, or if you'd like to just go ahead and ask a question, go ahead and unmute yourself as well.
Royce.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Elisa Ogden. I was wondering, you know, we've talked in the past quite a bit about being able to get National Weather Service rain gauges that are certified rain gauges around. And do you mind talking about that a little bit, please?
All right. So I think when most people talk about certified rain gauges, what we're talking about is the National Weather Service Cooperative Weather Program. These are long-term weather stations that they're volunteer observers with the National Weather Service. We're kind of selective on where we put those sites, partially because that is a long-term site. We're looking, that is basically the backbone of the nation's climate data. And as well, they have to have an operational support for the National Weather Service. A lot of our co-ops data helps support the hydrologic program, our 24-hour analysis, and other sites. So they require staff members going out, the observer agreeing to become a cooperative observer, having the right siting. Siting is extraordinarily important because we're looking to keep a site around ideally for generations. We've got observers, we've got stations here in New Mexico with families of observers dating back to the 40s or 30s. So we're looking for long-term sites. So there's certainly some sites we've had to close in the last 10 years as families, observers have passed on, have retired, have moved. Sites have been closed. We've had a few burned over. So we're cost selective on those. But I think where folks who really want to get involved can help. And the data is archived. It's used in drought management. It's used in the U.S. Drought Monitor. It's used in our operational weather analysis as well. It's the COCO-ROS program. And the state coordinator of that is Dave Dubois. He's the New Mexico state climatologist down there at NMSU. COCO-ROS does not have the same sort of siting requirements, does not have this kind of the same paperwork and expectations, but it's citizen science. It is archived along with our cooperative station data. It's a fairly new network. And the difference too is the gauge, it's fairly low cost gauge, like a little bit less stringent siting requirements. But that's certainly probably, and we highly encourage COCO-ROS. It's an easy way to get your precipitation data out to the National Weather Service, out to the National Center for Environmental Information, and get it out there and get it used. So we certainly encourage COCO-ROS. Like I said, we're a little selective on co-op program, and those approvals have to be all the way up to national to add in cooperative weather stations. But COCO-ROS, certainly we don't have to. And we highly encourage COCO-ROS observations. We use them all the time, and they're a great asset.
And then what about the Mesonet expansion program? Where's that?
I can't speak to that. That's a state issue. So that's something Dr. Dave Dubois, the state climatologist, would have to discuss. We're a federal agency, so that has to go through Dr. Dubois, and that whole thing is he would be the ideal one to discuss what the status of that is.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Not a problem.
I've got a question. This is Pat Woods.
Go ahead, sir.
I you're feeling pretty confident about your forecast there, I know. And is that probability, I mean, high probability is what? 90%, 80%? How how sure are you of what you were seeing on your forecast there?
Well, and I would say my confidence is what these numbers are. So what we're doing here is we're shifting. If you want to think about it, we're weighing the dice, and so if I'm rolling that dice, depending on where you are in there, and mind you, this is a broad scale sort of outlook, and these are actually considered outlooks, and I consider forecasts. Certainly we have seen La Nina winters that have been well above normal snow-wise and precipitation. Actually, 2016, 2017 was a weak La Nina, although this La Nina is looking to be moderate to strong, and we had pretty good precipitation. I think the key factor for us is even if we get an average winter, and let's go back and look here at the Pecos last year. We see this red trace here. That was the stow water equivalent for the Pecos. It was actually at its peak at normal at when it's expected. But with that low soil moisture, that's really what inhibited our runoff. We're reaching a point now where it's going to be tough to get that soil moisture up. If we really ideally would like to see to get that soil moisture up, a few warm and wet systems where we're getting rain, not snow, at the lower elevations and helping bring in upping that soil moisture. We're getting meteorologically, that's going to be kind of difficult to get. That's not something typically we see this time of year in the Pecos River Basin, particularly the headwaters. So even if we're at a normal, and this is just where we're starting, even if we're at a normal winter, we're going to struggle to see at this point some really great runoff. Certainly it's possible, and that's what we keep in mind. Even though you see this look in December, January, February, we see this really nasty brown everywhere. There's still that possibility in there for a normal to above normal winter. It's just reduced. So La Nina's here. That's happening. That's not a forecast there. Analog, looking at history and the trends tend to give us a below normal. So even if the outlook is wrong, or I should say it's in that rare percentile that we see a normal to a gangbusters winter, we're probably going to see, my confidence is fairly good that we're trending to a below normal runoff simply based on our soil moisture. And it certainly is the possibility we'll see a normal runoff, but that's the way things are pointing right now. We're certainly hoping that we see that above normal winter to get that great runoff. We need it desperately. We didn't, particularly in the Pecos, those reservoirs didn't get a monsoon recharge, but the trends are already starting us off kind of in the hole there. So I'd say it's, confidence is pretty good on the broad outlook. The devil's always in the details. The Pecos the headwaters are a fairly small basin, so they could do really well. Again, the problem's going to be is that soil moisture going to the Pecos River Basin.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Royce. And I'm not seeing any questions popping up in the chat. And so unless anybody else has a question, we really appreciate your insights and your expertise and being with us this evening. Even
Marshall?
though it's not the greatest news, we'll hope to turn that around in the coming year.
Marshall, Jim Lissing. Hey, I had a question for Royce on the that map of the NRCS on the Pecos River. When he's shown it back in May, when our normal rainfall and runoff is on that river and it melts down into Santa Rosa and they store it over there, but when it's released, is the accountability figured in through NRCS when it's released and it goes through Fort Sumner's Dam down to Carlsbad? Just about on a dry year like that, just about 50% of that water that's released actually makes it to Carlsbad. Is that put into accountability, Royce?
So Jim, this is purely the snow water equivalent. This is the measured snow in the headwaters of the Pecos or the Rio Grande. So, you know, the channel losses, those sort of things, that's not being discussed in this graph. This is purely the snow. So yes, soil moisture, that's going to be, you know, those losses are part of any time you route water. That's not going to matter what the management decisions, which are, and to be clear, that is management decisions on the Pecos, that Interstate Stream Commission, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, all those other compacts are part of. So when we do when we do the stream flow forecast, which is not what I'm showing here, this is purely the snow that was in the headwater. We look at what's called natural flow. We do not account when we do the volumetric forecast, which means how much we think you're going to get. Us and NRCS do not account for dams. You really can't. So we purely predict the volume. And then I'd have to look, but I believe on the Pecos, the last we have a lower Pecos point off tributary that we do an outlook for, but basically we stop at Santa Rosa because of those management decisions. So you know, purely this graphic is only showing the snow, and like I said, if you don't have water from a monsoon in those reservoirs, you know, we will get those late recharges. This is what you're kind of working with as your inflow. So the inflow to Santa Rosa is primarily coming from, on the base flow, coming from the snow water equivalent, the melt, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. Royce, we want to say also we greatly appreciate everything that you do for the state of New Mexico. And you've done a really good job in explaining everything on this the slides. And once again, thanks, Royce.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Good evening. This is Marge Lantana. I have a question for Royce.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Marge. Like I said, I'm from the Navajo Nation and situated right, let's say by Crown Point, New Mexico. And you are right that we had monsoon failed twice on us, and we're in a deep drought. And I'm right there where the yellow, yeah, the other, well, I'm right in McKinley County, right at back to right about right there in the brown section. What is the outlook, or what is the forecast for this coming summer or springtime in 2021? Do you have any projection, or do you?
I didn't include because we're more focused on the winter, but if you give me a second, I will get the Climate Prediction Center up here. Really, La Nina is expected to continue through the spring, and then as of now, they're expecting that to go back into a normal kind of neutral, which means not cold, not wet. The catch is when we start getting the monsoon season, I'll be honest, our predictability in monsoon season is not that great. There's a lot of subtle factors that go into how the monsoon will play out. We certainly saw that this year where the monsoon moisture, it wasn't just failing in the Southwest, it failed down in Mexico as well. So let's look at the March, April, May here. Temperatures for most of the region here holding even stronger signal above normal. This is, and honestly, this should be no surprise. Our trend is for above normal temperatures. And when we're talking about normal, we're talking about temperatures from 1981 through 2010. These normals will be updated next year. But precipitation wise, March, April, May, that tail end going into really what we call meteorological spring, which, you know, is the 1st of March, which happy meteorological fall, meteorological winter, everyone, that's today, showing below normal probability. So again, that's consistent with a La Nina coming out. And as we go into the summer months, so let's do May, June, July, early monsoon season. You can see here the Climate Prediction Center, temperatures above normal. Climate Prediction Center goes to equal chances, which means they really don't have a good sense one way or another how that's going to turn out. There's no one model. There's not consensus of the model data, or, you know, both computer and statistical, of how this is going to turn out. So if you're rolling that dice for March, June, July, May, June, July right now, they're saying, yeah, it could go either way. It really is an equal chance. So right now, The spring, spring proper is looking at below normal. But once we start getting into early monsoon season, and remember June, of course, is typically a dry month over western New Mexico. As we're starting to get into early monsoon, as a matter of fact, we'll go into the core monsoon right here. You can see there's equal chances. They're really not, they don't have great skill. So we'll see how that turns out. Certainly, we're concerned. The San Juan River Basin, actually, I didn't include it since our focus is a little more eastern New Mexico this time. The San Juan River Basin right now is actually running at normal snow water equivalent. They still have the soil moisture issue over there because, again, we've had 2 failed monsoon seasons. But what precipitation has been going has really been doing well in the San Juan Mountains. A lot of the ski resorts there are starting to open where they can. So water outlook on right now on the San Juan River, the Animas is early, probably to have the soil moisture issue, but the snow's looking a little bit better over there right now. So we'll see how this shakes out a little more, but certainly at least through the winter, looking at dry, and then we'll have to see when monsoon comes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Royce. And I know we've held you over a little bit longer than usual, but we really appreciate you taking the time and answering all of these questions.
Oh, not a problem at all. Not a problem at all.
I would like to make a quick note to everybody. We are recording this session and it will be posted on the center's website in a couple of days. In addition, all of the presenters have graciously offered to make their slide decks available, and so we will be sending that out to everybody who is registered as well. So our next speaker guest is Aaron Baylock. He's going to be presenting on behalf of the Pecos Valley Artesian Conservancy District. Aaron, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you. I wish I had better news for everyone, and if we're having problems hearing me, well, let me know and I'll call in and maybe we can circumvent the problem that way. I won't spend a lot of time talking about the compact or the settlement agreement, which are kind of the major themes over here when we get into water scarcity. Long story short, we have a very healthy credit with the state of Texas. So our primary concern is not so much how we're going to get water to Texas. We come up with what we refer to as the settlement agreement, which was a product of that litigation with Texas. And in that, the parties all agreed that we would make an extra effort to try and make water available for the Carlsbad Irrigation District. And so we are in one of those circumstances where there is simply not enough water in storage to meet the needs of the CID. So right now we have about 21,000 acre feet of water in storage total. And that is at Santa Rosa, at Fort Sumner, and at Brantley. And to put that into context, in 2012, which was one of our worst years in this valley, at this same time, we had about 15,400. So we're not as bad as we were in 2012, but we're pretty close. So it's certainly dry. So as a result of that, the ISC, instead of waiting until the March deadline or target, I should say, to turn on those pumps when we knew that there wasn't going to be the objective being the target is 50,000 acre feet in storage in March, and we're pretty confident we're not going to be there. So we've started running the wells, the pumps at Seven Rivers to augment the river. We're pumping water into Brantley. And we've also opened some of the valves. We've got some artesian pressure upstream at Lake Arthur. And so our losses were pretty significant. We're keeping a pretty close eye on that. We were losing in the neighborhood of 20% of the water that was coming in from Lake Arthur. We lost about 20% of it by the time it got down to Brantley. But as the irrigation season slows, the artesian pressure should increase. That gradient should come back towards the river. And so what was a gaining reach, what was a losing reach of the river should become a gaining reach of the river again. and we'll be getting more of that water downstream. So that is, in a nutshell, what the situation is over here. Oh, I mentioned the 2012 scenario there. In 2012, when we had 15,400 acre feet, in December, by March, we had 27,600. So if everything kind of holds to that, we could hope to gain up to about 12,000 acre feet. If we've got 20,000, you can do the math. That puts us at about 32,000. And so we're quite a ways short of that 50,000 target. If we suddenly went into an average inflow situation, well, then we'd be looking at being closer to 4 or 5 or 6,000 acre feet below that 50,000 target. So it's certainly dry. The comment that was made earlier about the drying of the river, that's why that credit with Texas is so incredibly important. We don't get in trouble with Texas when we're in a drought. We get in trouble with Texas as we come out of the drought. And kind of the worst thing we can do from a water management standpoint is go from exceptional drought like we're seeing right now to an average year. And so just for the purposes of conversation, it's pretty easy to say that Texas gets half of the inflows. So we catch that water at those reservoirs, we try and release it to Texas, our conveyance losses go way up. And that's where having that credit with Texas is super important to us. So we're in pretty good shape with meeting our obligations under the compact, but it's going to be a pretty bad year this year. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to take a stab at them. Have I rendered clear that which was blindingly evident?
Thank you very much, Mr. Baylock. I'm not seeing anything coming up in the chat, so if folks want to go ahead and unmute themselves, they can ask a question that way as well. And as a reminder, we will leave some time at the end if Mr. Baylock is amenable to go ahead and answer some questions at the end as well.
I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you very much, sir. So with that, we'll move on. Our next speaker is from the New Mexico Office of the State Engineer, Ms. Hannah Risley White. The screen is yours, ma'am.
Hello, everybody. This lighting is crazy. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I do have some slides I can share, so hold on one second. Okay. So let's see. Hopefully you see my slideshow here. There you go. So can you see that?
Yes, ma'am, you're good to go.
Okay, great. So my name is Hannah Risley White. I am actually the Deputy Director at the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission. So we are a sister agency of the Office of the State Engineer. We work with those folks really closely. You know, the Office of the State Engineer is sort of the administrative wing. They do, you know, regulatory actions such as permitting. Interstate Stream Commission is tasked with ensuring our compliance with interstate compacts, as well as compliance with a number of federal environmental regulations like the Endangered Species Act. And then we also do water planning. And so one of our commissioners just spoke with you, Commissioner Aaron Bollock, and we're so lucky to have him. I also recognize a number of names on this Zoom from various partnerships working on the Pecos over the years, and just want to say what a pleasure it's been working with everybody. I'm going to speak to some of the topics that Aaron just spoke to. So thank you, Aaron. You helped me skip through a couple of these slides. But I just wanted to let you all know what we're doing at Interstate Stream Commission, especially with regard to shortages for the Carlsbad Irrigation District looking into next year's irrigation season. To frame things on the Pecos, and many of you know this very well, if not better than I do, I thought it might be worth just talking about the overarching challenges that we face. So on this slide, you'll see a map of the entire Pecos Basin in New Mexico. And there are significant challenges, one being the interstate challenge of getting water to Texas, and Aaron just spoke to that and how much it's affected the various solutions that have been developed on the Pecos. I think one of the primary issues really historically has been that we have a significant irrigation district just upstream from the state line. And so over the years, it's been very challenging for New Mexico to deliver our obligation to Texas under the Pecos River Compact, because there are dams damming up the river just above the state line. So that's been historically a significant challenge. And then we also have the challenge, the interstate challenge of senior surface water users downstream from junior groundwater users. So in terms of priority administration, obviously that's a challenge. In years in which Carlsbad is short, it's not like junior groundwater users can stop pumping and immediately that water reaches Carlsbad. So that presents some challenges within New Mexico. And then this figure will be familiar from Royce's presentation, and I just want to echo what others said about Royce. He's been incredibly helpful in getting information to us and helping us navigate, what to expect in terms of climate throughout the state. But certainly looking at the Pecos, things look particularly bad, and this map over the last few weeks has gotten worse and worse. That dark red has been expanding. And at this time, all of the Pecos Basin is in what's called either extreme or exceptional drought. And so those challenges that I've talked about in the previous slide are exacerbated under these conditions, and certainly something that you all out in the basin are well aware of and feeling on a daily basis in terms of how dry it is. And so then Aaron just mentioned, at this point, the state of New Mexico is augmenting supply for CID. There's been a fair amount of press coverage of this, so you may have seen something in your local paper. There's also been a little bit of confusion about why we're pumping, and that's where I appreciate Aaron's comment about, we do have a significant cumulative compact credit right now to Texas. We have 166,300 acre feet. And a lot of that is actually due to the 2003 Pecos settlement agreement, and I'm going to get into that now. But the reason that we're pumping right now is to increase supply for CID. And this map, just to orient everybody, shows the well fields that Aaron just mentioned. Our primary well field is located at Seven Rivers. The advantage of that is it's right at Brantley, so we're able to pump right into the reservoir. The farther upstream and less significant but also important well field is at Lake Arthur. And as Aaron said, we have a number of wells there with valves just open right now. The Artesian pressure is allowing us to get water to the river. The conveyance losses, as he mentioned, had come up a couple weeks ago. We were kind of concerned about it. I'm happy to say we're now back down around 10%. So that's good news in terms of making sure the water coming out at Lake Arthur is making it down to Brantley. So what's this whole Pecos settlement thing about? Some of you on here probably know it really well, and for others, maybe you've never even heard of it. So just to make sure we're clear what's going on here, why we're pumping. The 2003 Pecos settlement agreement requires the state of New Mexico to augment supply for CID under certain conditions. And as Aaron mentioned, we're under those conditions right now. We anticipate that CID will have less than 50,000 acre feet of supply on March 1st. And I should say, we send out 5 projections every year for Carlsbad project supply. The projection for March 1st is the first of those 5 for next irrigation season. And, it definitely looked like it would be short. However, I should say that projection tool uses average historical inflow data. So as Aaron mentioned, given the climate forecast, we're really looking at something, significantly below that 50,000. We're anticipating something more like 10 to 12,000 below the 50,000. And then I should also say our goal in terms of augmenting flows is what we anticipate to get between now and March 1st into Brantley is an additional 6,000 acre feet. Obviously, we're doing our best. We hope to get more than that, but that's what's realistic. And the Pecos settlement agreement really has proven to be the state's strongest tool in terms of ensuring our compliance with the compact. And I also just really want to stress here that this is a solution that was crafted collaboratively by a number of water users from throughout the basin. Over a 2-year period, there were meetings that were held almost bi-weekly that were, most of them were public. A significant number of people participated in sort of trying to figure out how to solve some of those problems that I mentioned earlier. And so this agreement is something that largely the state is tasked with implementing, but is something that came out of this extensive collaborative process in the basin with all the significant water users participating. Ultimately, the signing parties were the Office of the State Engineer, our sister agency, the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission, Pecos Valley Artesian Conservancy District, where Aaron is the superintendent, and the Carlsbad Irrigation District and U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And just to place it in history for you all a little bit, as Aaron mentioned earlier, so New Mexico was sued by Texas in 1974 for chronic underdeliveries under the Pecos River Compact. This chart right here shows what ultimately was the accounting that was determined by the US Supreme Court, and they agreed with Texas. We had underdelivered for decades. They ruled in Texas's favor in 1987, and at that point, our debt was reset to 0. However, New Mexico was given very strict instructions by the court's decree to never underdeliver to Texas again. So if we ever have a cumulative shortfall, so not necessarily an annual shortfall, in year to year, we might underdeliver, but as long as our cumulative, we can build up a credit over time. So as long as our cumulative credit stays above 0, we're good. The minute we go below 0, we have 9 months under the US Supreme Court's decree to deliver wet water to Texas. And so that really put us under the gun to make sure that we could deliver our obligation to Texas. And following that 1987 decision, the state invested heavily, largely in annual leases, especially of water from CID for state line delivery. And it became clear that that was not going to be a long-term solution, that we needed to have a more permanent solution. And as you can see from this chart, we were also creeping precariously close to that red line. In 2002, our cumulative credit was 6,000 acre feet, which is easily something that we could underdeliver in a single year. So in 2001, all of these various water users in the state got together to try to work out a solution. And those meetings of the ad hoc committee began. And really what was at stake here was our continued control of the river. If we were to not be able to comply with the Supreme Court's decree, there was a threat that New Mexico could not maintain control. So in 2003, the Pecos Settlement Agreement was signed. It was a very creative solution to a number of those challenges that I outlined earlier in this presentation. And as you can see in this chart, we've done quite well under the compact since then. A large part of that is due to the Pecos Settlement Agreement. Obviously, not all of it was. There were certainly some well-placed storms that contributed to our state line delivery, but significant portions of it really can be tied directly to the 2003 Pecos Settlement Agreement. And that puts us in a much better place than, say, folks on the lower Rio Grande right now who are embroiled in conflict with Texas. So the objectives were really, long-term compliance with the Supreme Court's amended decree, but then also an increased and more stable water supply for CID and the reduced likelihood of a priority call within New Mexico. And the mechanism to do that was largely to decrease overall depletions in the basin, sort of bring things back into hydrologic balance. So how did it do that? What was included in that agreement to achieve those goals? Well, largely it was state purchase of water rights. So the state was required to purchase water rights associated with between 4,500 and 6,000 acres in CID and between 7,500 and 11,000 acres in the Roswell Artesian Basin. And I should say that the state just didn't quite, but essentially met those minimum requirements. So we have not had funding to continue to execute those purchases, but the parties determined that our purchases were sufficient to meet the obligations of the state in the agreement. And then those water rights, so mostly by purchasing them, they then aren't used. So that reduces depletions, makes more water available for water users in those areas, and also increases flows to the state line. However, under certain conditions, the state-owned CID water rights are available for state line delivery. And then, the Artesian groundwater rights purchased in the Roswell Basin were transferred to the augmentation well fields that you saw on that map earlier. I should say that the state also purchased some shallow groundwater rights and surface water rights, and those are basically just retired. And then in terms of the augmentation well fields, the requirement for the state was to construct well fields that would have a capacity to deliver at least 15,750 acre feet per year. So far, those well fields have only been used to deliver for CID, to augment supply for CID in 2011, 12, and 13. But they're also available for us to deliver water that would be passed through CID to the state line under a shortfall condition under the compact. So they're a little safety net for us. If we had to, we'd have that available as well. In terms of the benefits of the settlement and the outcomes, well, certainly for CID, reduced depletions, particularly upstream, results in more flows into CID's reservoirs, which is helpful. Again, we pumped for CID in 2011, 12, and 13. And during those 3 years, we pumped approximately 44,000 acre feet. So that was additional supply available to CID, because of those well fields and the settlement agreement. And then when the state-owned CID water rights are not required for state line delivery, and that occurs when we're over a certain cumulative compact credit threshold. So when we're over 115,000 acre feet of cumulative credit under the compact, those state-owned CID water rights can be reallocated to other CID members. So that makes more water available for CID members when we're in good times. So, really the settlement was clever in trying to keep as much water in New Mexico as possible when it isn't needed for state line delivery. So, that's why we're not pumping now for the state line, and also our state-owned CID water rights aren't required for state line delivery. But then when it's needed, that state-owned CID water is delivered. And so that's been true for the last 5 years. CID's been able to take that portion and reallocate it to its members, which is a benefit, increases supply. And then in terms of benefits for folks in the Pecos Valley Artesian Conservancy District, again, reduced depletions is a benefit. Also, there's a reduced likelihood of a priority call if CID has more supply. So that's certainly been a goal. And then also the settlement agreement limited CID's ability to call for priority. So under the settlement, CID can only call for priority if they have less than 50,000 acre feet of supply. And we're certainly worried and concerned about that looking into next year. There's no doubt about it. In terms of benefits for the state as a whole, and the Pecos Basin as a whole, again, those reduced depletions are a benefit to users in various areas. Also, those increased flows contribute to state line delivery, helping ensure our compliance with the compact. The state-owned portion of the CID rights, when they have been required for state line delivery, were approximately 75,000 acre feet. So a significant portion of that credit that you saw on that chart is directly attributable to those releases from CID. That's where we sort of solved partially the problem of how to get water around CID to the state line. And then again, as I said, we have those well fields which are available for state line delivery if and when we need them. Hopefully we'll never be in that situation. So really, I should say, in my time working on the Pecos, I've become increasingly impressed with the success of the Pecos settlement agreement in terms of its primary objective, helping us meet our compact obligations, and also the work that was done by all of the parties to craft it and then implement it, and the tremendous effort in getting funding to make that possible through the legislature. It really was a heavy lift to put it in place, and it's been very successful. But I should also say there's definitely some lessons learned. Buying significant water rights and drying large chunks of agricultural areas is awful to see. You know, it's had a significant impact on local communities. And so that approach of buying and drying is something that we've looked at very carefully and thought about in terms of, you know, if we were to ever do something like this again, that's something that really needs serious consideration. And then also, you know, the settlement wasn't successful in preventing a priority call in 2013. CID called for priority. So one of the things that we've learned is certainly these well fields can't replace the flow of a river. If it's a very dry year, it's incredibly challenging to get enough water to CID. And that's where we are today. So I think there's a real need for us all to sort of think through creative solutions to prepare for future prolonged drought. Beyond the augmentation well fields, they certainly are only a small piece of the puzzle. I also wanted to just comment that we did in 2014-15 install variable frequency drives on 10 of our wells at the well fields. Those are an improvement in terms of giving us a little bit more control of how we operate. And there's a real benefit there. And last, you know, compact compliance is expensive. Over all of the years that the state has been working to ensure our compliance with the Supreme Court's decree, we've spent over $130 million. So it's a significant investment and something to be considered. So what to expect? The Interstate Stream Commission, you know, we're committed to delivering as much water to Brantley as we possible over the coming months. We also have funding in place to pump through the spring and plans and funding requests in place to pump into 2022. We're, you know, hoping for the best. I've heard Aaron say this, hoping for the best and planning for the worst. And so that's where we're at right now. I should also say that I know that our director, Rolf Schmidt-Peterson, and the state engineer, John D'Antonio, have been communicating regularly with the governor's office in preparation for a drought declaration. They've provided all of the relevant information there. And I would expect to be seeing that coming from the governor's office soon. And then last, just to say, you know, I would love to hear from you all if you have any suggestions on additional solutions for the Pecos. There's certainly still work cut out for us. And I so appreciate all the partnerships on the ground out there and helping us get this settlement agreement implemented. And really with that, I'll take questions. I'll also put up on the screen here is my contact information, and then Alec Norman is a staff hydrologist at the Pecos Bureau at Interstate Stream Commission. You're welcome to reach out to either of us, and then there's also our website there with more information. And with that, I'm happy, Marshall, to take any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I appreciate that. I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet, so if folks want to go ahead and unmute themselves, they can ask a question then as well.
Hannah, would you explain what wet water and how to access wet water means? I'm Lisa Ogden. If we need to put water to meet with the compact, where the first source of wet water is available.
Oh, yes. Hi, Lisa. Good to hear you on here. So yeah, I think the reason that I say wet water in terms of that compact compliance piece, I'm sorry, I stopped sharing my screen. Maybe I should put it back up with the contact info there. Hold on. So when the court ruled in Texas's favor in 1987, New Mexico was allowed to pay damages to Texas. So we paid a $14 million fine, which clearly is a lot of money, but could have been a lot worse. Texas was asking for, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars. So ultimately that wasn't as bad as it could have been. But one of the things that the court was particularly worried about was that New Mexico would continue to underdeliver and then just think, oh, we'll pay a fine. Like, we underdelivered, we'll pay a fine. And so they were very explicit in their ruling that if we underdelivered, we had to get the actual wet water to the state line. And so that's where on the Pecos, as you all know, can be very unpredictable. And so if you're in a short year and you just don't have the wet water, it could be very problematic. I also think for you all in CID, I would be concerned because where's the easiest place to get some wet water from for state line delivery? I mean, obviously I don't know what we would do in that situation, but certainly something that we hope never occurs, right? I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Hannah. I just wanted people to know. So if you're familiar with Carlsbad and you've seen the Christmas on the Pecos and you see that we have a Lake Carlsbad, so that's the closest wet water that would be released. And then from there it would go to Avalon and then Brantley. And we would have to keep releasing water until we had complied. So that's where the wet water is and the closest sources of it.
Any
Miss
other-
Hannah, Jim Lissy out of Fort Sumner.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for your presentation. Very informative. So what we're looking at is in doing an expansion of the weather stations, of the Mesonet weather stations from at New Mexico State University, Dr. Dubois' department. And I was just gonna see if you would be in support of that weather station expansion. We're looking about possibly 130 weather stations throughout the state of New Mexico, and how that could possibly help your department of the Office of the State Engineer and Interstate Stream Commission.
Oh, I'm in support 100%. I think the more data we have, the better off we are. In fact, we had a challenging thing a few years ago where one of the weather stations that's specifically used for Pecos River compact accounting is the climate station at Carlsbad Caverns National Park, and they decided to discontinue that station. So it's really challenging when you're trying to use long-term data sets and have, see those data collection points, being eliminated. So we ended up using a RAWS station that's a bat draw RAWS station. It's really close to that Carlsbad National Park station. But for us, I think the more data you have, the better. And particularly on the Pecos, where you see sort of very regionalized storm systems or storm systems that really just hit small areas, it's hard to capture that unless you have more data points. So yeah, I would very much support that effort.
Thank you, Ms. Hannah. Thank you, Marshall.
Yeah, my name is Wade Cavett, and I have a question. There was a case argued before the Supreme Court approximately a month ago on this Texas-New Mexico. Could you address that, what's your opinion and how that might affect our current compact?
Absolutely, good question. So yes, you are correct. On October 5th, we argued in front of the US Supreme Court in a case related to the storage of water for Texas in New Mexico and Brantley Reservoir in 2014-15. As you all may recall, there was a big storm in 2014, September of 2014. There was significant flooding on the lower Pecos. Red Bluff Reservoir in Texas was full. So Texas ended up asking us. Initially, we stored water in Brantley because of the public safety hazard of the flooding. But then once those concerns had subsided, Texas, because Red Bluff was full, asked for us to hold the flood flows for them in New Mexico until such time as they could be used in Texas. We ended up holding that water for about a year. It ended up being about 50,000 acre feet. But while it was in Brantley, about 20,000 acre feet of it evaporated. And so the understanding all along and all of the communication with Texas was that we would be credited for those evaporative losses because but for Texas's request, that water would have been released to the state line, turning those gauges and giving New Mexico the credit that we were due. Ultimately, Texas balked at that commitment and said they didn't want to have us be credited. We had a briefing process in front of the federal river master. So part of that US Supreme Court established a federal river master who does the annual accounting. He ended up deciding in our favor, although we split some of those losses for the initial period in which there was public safety concerns in both states. But he credited us for 16,600 acre feet. And that's part of that 166,300 that's our current cumulative credit. Texas did not like the river master's decision. They appealed that to the US Supreme Court. The US Supreme Court asked for oral argument. And so, and I should say, they also asked for the US to weigh in, and the Solicitor General's office in DC also briefed the court. Their briefing was in our favor as well. They agreed with the River Master. So we actually shared some of our argument time with folks from the Solicitor General's office. We are expecting a decision on that in the coming months. Based on the questions from the justices, we felt like it's likely the court will rule in our favor, but obviously you don't know until you know. If they ruled against us, we would lose 16,600 acre feet of our cumulative credit. I should say the other thing we were concerned about on that case is just the potential that the court was questioning the role of the federal river master. And we actually feel that he's done a very good job of sort of arbitrating the accounting year to year. Both states, he presents preliminary accounting, both states file objections, he weighs those and then comes up with a final accounting. I think that's kept us out of a lot of conflict over the years. And so we were concerned that the court might have been concerned with both just that 16,000 acre foot credit, but also the role of the river master. So we'll see where they land on that. But like I said, we're cautiously optimistic that they would rule in our favor.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Hannah. And I do see we have a question in the chat. We'll take this one and then move on to our next presenter, and I'll read it for the benefit of the folks on the phone. The question is anyone looking at the use of the Ogallala aquifer in far eastern New Mexico and the use by Texas farmers as compared to New Mexico farmers?
So I can say, and maybe Aaron or others want to comment on this. I haven't been looking at that particularly closely. I do think that folks at the Office of the State Engineer have been. And I can say that I've had a number of conversations with folks in that part of the state who are very concerned. The question has come up on a number of occasions. You know, we have these interstate compacts around shared river systems. Why don't we have compacts with shared groundwater basins? And I think that's a very fair question. I think as supplies continue to dwindle and there's increased pressure on water sources like the Ogallala, you know, New Mexico regulates groundwater. If folks are across the state line in Texas can just pump whatever they want, that's a serious problem. So I don't have an answer for you in terms of where that's headed, but I would expect to hear more discussion on how to handle that problem in the years to come.
All right, thank you, ma'am, and we really appreciate your presentation. And once again, for the folks, she's also agreed to make her presentation available to the public. And so if anybody wants to go back and reference that, then we will be sending that out as well. And we really appreciate that, Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Our final speaker for this evening for the Farm Service Agency is Mr. Anthony Chavez. Anthony, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Marshall. Let me see if I can get this to work. Let me see here. Are you able to?
We see your PowerPoint, not the actual presentation up yet.
Let me see. Maybe.
We see the presenter's view.
How about that? All right. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Chavez. I'm with the Farm Service Agency. I actually am one of 5 state specialists, and my area of expertise and duties are on disaster programs. So I'm responsible for providing information to the state, to the county offices in reference to administering most of our disaster programs. I know this is about drought, but I'm also going to probably talk about some other programs that we offer that are related to drought and to just support programs for producers in the state of New Mexico. So with that, of course, the Farm Service Agency, we're part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we're the programs that provide safety nets for farmers and ranchers. That's just a basic background on what our mission is, and to provide equitable service to all farmers and ranchers and agricultural partners through the delivery of effective and efficient agriculture programs for all Americans. Our big deal right now is I guess what I want to stress is that we are open. All of our county offices are open throughout the state. They are staffed. Most of them have at least 1 or 2 people within the office. This week we did get notification that they did, I guess, draw us back, where we're not allowed to have appointments or have actual producers in our office or appointments. So I do ask that as you start working with FSA and coming in and contact us, it's going to be mostly by emails or phone calls because we're not able to actually meet physically with our producers right now. So please be patient with a lot of our staff, because I know that they're doing a good job in trying to get all our information out there, but they are hamstringed under certain criteria that we have to do. But they did pull us back in several of our offices that we're not allowed to have producers or actually have face-to-face contact. I'm going to pretty much talk, and my slideshow really isn't kind of like the other slideshows where we provide a lot of stuff. It's going to be mostly me presenting and just kind of telling you about them. But these are just placeholders. So most of the programs that we that are relative to drought are going to be within the 7 programs that we have. One of them is actually a COVID program or under CFAP. But when we start looking at, you'll start hearing a lot when they declare emergency, drought emergency or drought assistance, the secretary does an executive order where they make a declaration. Traditionally, everybody starts getting, hey, we got a declaration and we got a declaration for drought. Those are just to kind of explain how those come about. Prior to the 2014 and 2008 Farm Bill, mainly to get a drought declaration, to actually implement any of our drought assistance programs, the FSA needed a declaration. So we would have to have either the secretary would have to declare a disaster, or the administrator or the president would have to declare a disaster before any of the funding or any of the programs started to implement. Since the 8 and 14 Farm Bills and also in the 18 Farm Bill, all the drought and all the disaster programs have been put into law. So they're all within our US Farm Bill now. So we don't have to have drought declarations anymore to implement those. We have triggers in some instances. And that's where we start utilizing any of our sister agencies, such as the National Weather Service, the US Drought Monitor, any of those programs that actually trigger some of the LFP programs or some of our livestock programs to actually pay out. But the one program that is still administered by a secretarial designation is emergency loans. So whenever you see a drought, and a matter of fact, there was one that just came out that they declared, I think, El Paso and Hudspeth counties as a drought related area, which also triggered Doñana and Otero as continuous counties. It allows for those counties to be eligible for emergency loans. So those emergency loans are available to producers that if they are not able to get loans through a commercial or conventional means, they can receive those emergency loans from FSA, up to $500,000 in operating loans to help them out. The other type of programs, and I mentioned, was like a trigger program. And LFP, which is our livestock forage program, is probably one of our major programs that we work with, that we use, the US Drought Monitor. So the US Drought Monitor triggers everything under LFP. So LFP is an annual program. It runs January 1 to December 31st. And at any time within that grazing period that we have, and for New Mexico, we have a 365-day grazing period or growing period for native grass. Now, this is for all livestock forages, for just forage programs. So once it is triggered in the drought monitor, which means that if we have D2 for 8 consecutive weeks, or D3 at any point in time, or D4, the program is triggered, and producers are eligible to up to 5 monthly payments based on a factor. These are factors, they're not actual month payments, but they're based on factors that producers are eligible. So actually today was the the last county, which is Sierra County, actually triggered for LFP at a D3 status, which means that they're going to have 1 month. They have 1 month from now until the end of the month to actually advertise and let all the producers know that they're eligible for LFP. So we do want to let all of our producers know, and if you know of any producers, pretty much the whole state, actually every county in the state has triggered for LFP. So if they are producers, they are eligible. They need to have all of their documentation and information into the FSA office, into their local FSA office by January 30th. So they have 30 days after the end of the year to make sure that all that's in. So we really are wanting to make sure we get the word out to let people know that they are eligible for that. LFP also does cover for wildfires on national forests. And so if we do have a wildfire, traditionally during fire season, and the forest or any federal agencies actually remove producers or livestock producers off of the land, then we can also compensate those producers under LFP if they are removed for wildfire. One of the programs that it's not really affected by drought, but it kind of is LIP. LIP is the livestock indemnity program. So where LFP actually supports grazing and forage, LIP is the actual animals. So LIP is the loss of livestock. So the loss of livestock due to some type of natural disaster. Now, drought does not come into play for LIP. So drought isn't covered under the loss of actual livestock because it would only cover the forage. But if there is a natural disaster, such as hail, lightning tends to be the most prevalent for LIP. And then in certain counties, such as Catron County or wherever we have induced predators that were induced by the federal government, such as wolves, gray Mexican wolves, then we will offset those costs of losses due to predation in that area. But it's only for something that would fall under the Endangered Species Act. So it doesn't cover coyotes or mountain lions or any of those areas. It does cover avian predators such as eagles, hawks, anything that would be covered under the Endangered Species Act, and of course, Mexican wolves. But LIP is a program for our producers for the loss of the actual livestock itself. We pay only on 75% of the value, and it's a national value. So it's not the full 100% value of what that actual livestock would cost. ELAP, which is the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program, is a trigger program. And so ELAP is the catch-all for anything that's not covered under LFP or under LIP. So the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program is also triggered in part by the drought monitor. Whenever we have a D3 or higher drought in a county, it triggers livestock water hauling. So what that would do is producers would be eligible once their county is triggered, then they can offset any other costs associated with having to haul water to their livestock or to fill their tanks or to fill dirt tanks. They can offset that cost, again, up to a certain factor of 5 that they accumulated throughout the year. So those are all handled on a calendar year. So if the drought monitor triggers within the calendar year, it goes until the end of the year. If it carries over from January, like right now, we are in D3 drought in quite a bit of the state and D4. If it carries over, then it'll start again on January 1 in the new year for a new allocation. ELAP also covers honeybees, which is a really big program. So anything that has to do with honeybees, colony collapse disorder, any of those areas are also covered under ELAP for natural disaster losses. TAP is a small program that not too many people take advantage of, but we may see more of it as we get natural disasters. This is not a trigger program. It's also a natural disaster program. So drought isn't affected by it, but it's also natural disasters such as hail, lightning, freeze, any of the things that would be considered an adverse weather event. So TAP covers losses to grapevines, grape vineyards, or trees, established orchards. So if there is, for instance, if we have a hard freeze, in 2011, we had a really huge hard freeze in the state, and several of the vineyards throughout the state were actually damaged. So a lot of the vineyard owners actually submitted to TAP, and it has it offsets some of the replacement costs to replant those vineyards. So that's one of our other programs. NAP is probably our biggest program within the state. Again, NAP is a disaster program. Now this program, all the other programs are what we say trigger programs by an adverse weather event. NAP is actually an application where you have to actually apply. So it's the closest thing what you would consider to as an insurance program. It's not really an insurance program, but it's kind of mimics an insurance program. There is a fee that's associated with the crops that you cover. On the drought side of it, we cover native grass. So our native grass applications are actually today, December 1st was the deadline for applying for native grass. But if you have not, or if you know producers that have not put in for applications for native grass losses, then the county committees do have some leadway up to 30 days. So they are still able to get their applications into their offices. So they need to contact one of our county committee or our county offices to put in those applications. So the way that we handle drought for NAP is done through loss assessments. So this is where Royce was talking about Cocoa Ross, or actually our weather stations. We also use PRISM data, and we use independent loss assessors to actually establish what is our percentage of loss throughout the state. So on an annual basis, each county will, by use of precipitation, like I said, through Cocoa Ross and through those monitoring stations, will establish some type of a percentage of loss based on the annual percentage rate. And that is taken to our state committee, who either approves or denies those percentages of losses. So it does become very important for our producers and those individuals that want to participate and have a voice. We do ask them, get involved. I mean, put up your Cocoa Ross stations, and actually you need to actually report those on a daily, if not by weekly basis. And we do use that information because that does become very important. But NAP not only covers native grass, so that's native grass that is our drought area, but it also covers other crops within the state. So drought is an eligible weather event due for non-irrigated crops. So if you have any non-irrigated crops that you are growing and you have NAP coverage on those non-irrigated crops, then drought is an eligible adverse weather event for those non-irrigated crops. For irrigated crops and certified irrigated crops, NAP is not an eligible, or drought is not an eligible adverse weather event, but other adverse weather events such as freeze, excessive moisture, hail, any of those adverse weather events do come into play for coverage. So we strongly encourage producers to get NAP insurance or NAP coverage because it is relatively inexpensive. It costs you about $350 service fee for a majority of your crops, up to a maximum of $1,800. And that's a 50-55 coverage. You can actually buy up just like you would some other insurances that you can actually get 100% of the payback on your loss of your crop as far as how it's established. CFAP is our program that's going on right now. We had CFAP 1 that is finished. We have CFAP 2 that is in process. And so we want to let everybody know that that deadline is December 11th, and it covers the majority of all specialty crops, alfalfa, it covers livestock, it covers eggs, it covers a wide variety of crops throughout that we have here in the state of New Mexico. So that is a self-certification program. So you need to contact your county offices and let them know that you're interested in applying for that program and get that information to them so that they can actually help you out. So the big deal on the CFAP 2 program is our deadline. It's a hard deadline. They haven't said anything about extending it. A lot of it has to do with the way budgets are right now with change of administrations, is December 11th. So we need to make sure that everybody knows that they got to get those applications in for CFAP 2 by December 11th. One of the things like with NAP, and I was talking about it earlier, is you have to pay a fee, But we have a wide variety of programs that actually, if you're a beginning farmer and rancher, which means that if you've been only farming 10 years or less, you're eligible to get those fees waived. And actually, if you want to buy up coverage, you can pay at half of the premium cost if you're a beginning farmer and rancher. But also, if you're socially disadvantaged, if you follow one of the socially disadvantaged groups, you're eligible for that fee waiver also. So and to be able to pay for those half fees. So a lot of times, it's mostly a paperwork exercise for a lot of our producers. Several of our producers fall under whether socially disadvantaged, beginning farmers, or veterans farmers. They fall under those categories. So it is worth it to contact your county offices to see where you fall in there, because it may not cost you anything. And if we do have a natural disaster as we get into things, it could offset some of your losses. One of the ways that we handle a lot of our information, we're pretty much a paperless agency. Everything we do is through farmers.gov or through some type of media, whether it's email. Farmers.gov is the main one. It's how it's streamlined and how our login information is. You can see your applications. It enables all the farmers to have access to all their forms and applications online. Our Gov delivery alerts, you can sign up for those through our office or also through the website. This is the way that we send out our announcements. It's our newsletters. It's how we communicate with the majority of our producers on a regular basis. But we strongly urge people to sign up for Gov delivery, because that's how they send out most of our correspondence. We also have text alerts on a regular basis. So most of our counties, just as reminders, like for deadlines, they use the text subscribing, where they'll send it out to their producers on texting. And you can sign up by the enclosed number, and this will all be made available to you. I believe Marshall said that we're going to provide these to everybody if you needed to get that number. Again, we do, like I said, we try to stay connected through FSA-USDA.gov and farmers.gov, also our Facebook pages. And I know I went through that very fast. I was trying to keep us in time, Marshall, but that's kind of what I had. And if I have any questions, I'll try and answer those for you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. We greatly appreciate your presentation this evening. So folks, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions for any of our speakers tonight, except for Mr. Fontenot. He had to leave. So if you do have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question, and go ahead, and you have the ability to use the chat function as well. We do ask that if you use the chat function, make sure and specify which presenter you're asking your question to. While we're waiting for anybody to ask questions, I'd like to introduce the co-director for the center, Mr. Tom Dean. Tom, do you have any words of wisdom, sir?
We would just like to thank everybody for jumping on with us this evening. I'd like to thank our presenters for their time and efforts putting things together for us. Been very informative, and definitely thank you, Marshall, for all your work in putting this thing together. So thanks everyone for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for that comment, Lisa. All right, well, I'm not seeing any more comments or questions rolling into the queue. I would like to reiterate that we will be posting a recording of this session on our website, as well as sending out the slides. And we also have one more meeting in this planned for this series, and that will be held on December 14th, and our target audience for our final meeting will be the ranching community. And so we look forward to that as well. That concludes this evening's presentation. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.